IBM invited me to speak at a meeting on customer loyalty.
I've been selling AS400s from IBM. Most of you probably think, okay, can we skip this? I sold them.
Down in Jacksonville, Florida. So I flew into Jacksonville, and I flew in there on Delta Airlines. I don't know if any of you flew Delta. Delta stands for Delays Every Landing Through Atlanta.
In the past, you had Sabina, it was a Belgian air carrier. And it stands for Sabina, such a bad experience, never again. Same thing, right? But they went bankrupt. That's probably why.
Don't expect luggage to arrive. Didn't even leave the airport.
We're laughing about it, right? But in every joke, there is a truth, right? Delta, make sure you get your things in order. Because over time, this video is already 14 years old. It did not really improve, to be honest.
Don't ever land there again, okay? So the flight's late, and I finally get in, and I get my old beat-up bag, my old tired body, and now I walk out of the airport and I get in the taxi cab line. So I'm standing in the cab line, finally get to the front of the cab line, worn out, it's after midnight, standing there. A guy pulls up in a cab just like this, jumps out of the cab, points at me and says, "Are you ready for the best cab ride of your life?"
Can you imagine that people would do that to you, right? The only experience I have, I was in China for the first time in my life and I get screwed in front of the line because they dragged me into a taxi and I had to pay way more than I should have paid. Interesting. Are you ready for the best video of your life?
I said, "Yeah, I guess so." He said, "Well, hop on in." So I'm kind of halfway afraid, now. So I get in the cab and the guy jogs over and he gets my bag and he puts it in his trunk and he jumps into the car and he turns around and he sticks out his hand and he says, "Mr. McCain?" I said, "Well, yeah, but how'd you know my name?" He said, "I saw it on your luggage tag. Figured I might as well use."
Sometimes it's so simple, right?
Use it. He said, "I'm Taxi Terry." I thought, oh, great, a motivational cab driver,
Motivational cab driver.
I shake his hand. "Hi, Terry." So we take off. He says, "So where are you going tonight, Mr. McCain?" I said, "Well, heading to the Marriott downtown." He said, "Fantastic, sir. Let's check out the weather." He reaches over. Now all of a sudden I realize he's got this pocket PC mounted in a very elaborate bracket in
Keep in mind, it's 14 years ago, eh?
his dash. And he hits a button and the screen pops up and he's got a magnifying thing over it. So very clearly I can read from the back seat what's on the screen. He's live real time on the internet. Weather.com pops up. You can see the seconds ticking away. It is the up to the second weather forecast for the next 3 days for Jacksonville. He says, "Oh, Mr. McCain, I hope you are a golfer. You're going to have fantastic weather here in Jacksonville." He says, "Sir, first of all, tell me, why are you here?" Well, I told him a little bit about the companies like I told you, and then I told him.
I always tell people, if it's about the experience, ask questions. It doesn't matter what it is. So why are you here? What brought you to town?
About, here to give a speech on customer relationships. Customer relationships, I am so into that, he says. "Do you mind if I record our conversation?" Who are you really, Have you seen Taxi Cab Confessions on HBO? I think, by the next show. And wait. How come you are so able to record the conversations in your cab? He says, "Well, you see, sir, I set it up that way because that way if, like Dr. Smith, a local customer, he gets in the cab and I'm taking him to the airport and he mentions that his daughter Jill is just enrolled in Vanderbilt. As soon as he gets out of the cab, I record that information. And then that night when I get home, I take all these little recordings I've made."
Interesting. I feel a conflict with GDPR.
"Throughout the day, and I take that information and I enter it into my database. A cab driver with a database."
Very interesting.
So the next time that the doctor calls for a ride to the airport, I've got that ready. It kicks it out. He gets in the cab. I turn to him and say, "By the way, doctor, how's Jill doing at Vanderbilt?"
Imagine that everybody in, let's say, not just sales, but customer facing would have this approach. Wow, that would change our lives, right?
He said, "You think he's going to ride with anybody else?" He told me a couple of, what else he did? He called the CBS affiliate down there. And he said,
what I constantly say during training, people make emotional choices and justify it with rational reasons. And this is a perfect example Why people make a decision based on emotions. Because if you get a question after a couple of weeks when you're driving a cab again, how's your daughter doing? You have this, we call that a common ground. You are in touch with each other, right? And it's not something very tangible, it's not rational, but it's very emotional. And at the end of the day, you make your decisions based on the emotions that you have. And this cab driver, or at least this example from a cab driver, is just filling it in. Now, what I always find interesting is that we are amazed that a cab driver is doing that. But we have this idea that when you are in selling SaaS solutions or software solutions or telecommunication solutions, it's not about the experience anymore, which is definitely not true.
Every morning I turn on the TV and you're always talking about where the wrecks are and how hard it's going to be to get to work, but you never give us an alternate route. Who knows an alternate route better than a cab driver? So now if there's a major
I have to correct that nowadays, we have Google.
accident in Jacksonville, this station goes live in the field to Taxi Terry, standing there with a microphone by his cab. Phone number right there, you know, telling you the alternate route to take to work. We have this great conversation. We pull up in front of the Marriott, and once again he throws me a curve. He jumps out of his cab, he runs to the back, he opens up the trunk.
If you haven't noticed it already, it's also about enthusiasm. If you're enthusiastic about what it is that you sell or the concept or the proposition that you have, enthusiasm is very contagious.
He takes out my luggage and holds it like it was kin. Hands it to the bellman. Turns to me. Now, we've all been here, right? I mean, we all travel. This is the point where they hand you a receipt and then they hand you a business card. Here's your receipt, you know, for your expenses, and here's a business card. Please call me and I'll take you back to the airport. And what we normally do is walk out of the hotel and whatever cab's sitting there, that's what we take.
Guilty as charged.
He turns to me, nothing in his hand. He says, Mr. McCain, I realize you're probably going to need a receipt for your expenses, and you may want to make a reservation to get a ride back to the airport. You can do both of those. Print out your receipt and make your reservation by going to my website, taxiterry.com.
Probably you was already aware of GDPR, so if people agree that they would go to your website and leave their data behind, you can work with it, right? Love it. Love it.
A cab driver with his own website and take care of that. He said, oh, one more thing, Mr. McCain. He said, you travel a lot, you talk to a lot of people, you're probably in a lot of cabs. He said, I'm franchising this. I'm franchising.
I like it. I like it.
Everything from the pocket PC in the cab to the, are you ready for the best cab ride of your life, to all of this. So if you ever...
I can imagine that he has a training from Taxi Terry, customer engagement, how to sell, how to create the experience. You need to be trained on that. That's for sure. That's a good thing. He made a franchise out of it.
Ever run into a cab driver that needs help with customer service? I'm thinking that would be all of them. He said, you tell him about Taxi Terry. Well, the next morning I get up to speak for IBM. This is the biggest thing that's happened to me for a while, right? So guess how I start my speech. Hey, in there last night, are you ready for the best cab ride of your life? The entire audience went, Taxi Terry!
Sometimes people say, why do you say that you make companies ridiculously successful? Basically, it's the same thing, because we constantly repeat that. We make companies and people ridiculously successful. Are you ready to become ridiculously successful? It's the same thing, right? So it's about the experience that you have. It's not experience in the training, it's also the experience that you have when we try to sell it to you. I love it. I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it.
He's the official cab driver for IBM. So now here is my fundamental question. If I can get that kind of service on a cab ride in Jacksonville, Florida, why shouldn't the customers of my businesses expect it? Why shouldn't the people that walk in the door of Express expect it?
That's so true. That is so true. And a lot of people out there just forget about the experience. It's not about the reasons or the arguments. It's really about the experience that people have. I say it one more time. People make emotional choices and justify it with rational reasons. So the experience people have, that's the emotion. And emotions are the biggest differentiator why people choose doing business with you.
And if I'm not, or if you aren't providing that, what's our excuse? I mean, if the cab driver can do it, why don't we? And if you can think of an excuse, I need your help because I can't think of any. I've got to hold myself to a higher standard.
I can. People say, yeah, but customer success is not doing what it's supposed to do. The planning is not really helping. Our product is not the right thing to do. So people come up with all kinds of excuses. But it's up to you to give the customer the experience that they expect. One more time. People make emotional choices and justify it with rational reasons.
Because if a cab driver can be that innovative, if a cab driver can change the game about what a ride is like from the airport to the hotel, surely to goodness we can find innovative ways to make that happen in our businesses. So when you get back home and you're getting ready to hit it one more time, would you think about what we talked about this morning? As you're walking out, splash a little cold water in your face. Look at yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, today it is showtime.
And I will see you in the next video, and make sure you subscribe.